In our previous video, we considered that the foundation of physical fit is rooted in physiology. But how did people even come to consider our physiology in respect to using tools and completing work? How did that even come to be? Well, that's a question that we're going to be addressing in this video, as well as exploring some additional factors related to physical fit. Now, physical fit includes a multitude of implications for how computing technologies are and should be designed, including our sensory perceptions, health-related problems, and support for different abilities and disabilities. I'm sure some of you, when you hear me discussing hardware and physical interaction, think of this other term. You might think of ergonomics, and rightly so. Physical fit has a lot in common with ergonomics, and in fact encompasses ergonomics in respect to how we physically work with technologies for task completion and how that impacts our body's well-being. Ergonomics as a field has a history that goes far beyond a time that the term physical fit even existed. Therefore, to better understand physical fit, it's really helpful to explore what the term means and where it came from. Ergonomics refers to the match between humans and tools and is the study of people's efficiency in their working environment. It evolved from two different Greek words, ergos and nomos. Ergos refers to work, while nomos means natural laws. And this makes sense when we consider the famous historical figure Hippocrates of Kos, who was a Greek physician that lived from about 460 BC to 375 BC, at a time when most people attributed sickness to superstition and the wrath of the gods. Hippocrates taught that all forms of illness had natural causes. He established the first intellectual school devoted to teaching the practice of medicine, and for this he is widely known as the father of medicine. And you're rightly asking yourself at this point, how does this relate to ergonomics? Well, there's evidence that the Greeks used principles of ergonomics back in the 5th century BC. You see, Hippocrates wrote about how a surgeon's workplace should be designed and how tools that he used in his workplace should be arranged. Now, it wasn't until 1949 that the discipline of ergonomics as a formal practice emerged. It included psychologists, design engineers, work study engineers, industrial medical officers, and other folks with an interest in human performance. The field began to mature once computing was introduced into the workplace around the 1960s. Now, although most people think of ergonomics as a computing-only related concept, it does speak more generally to the physical fit between humans and tools or machines, which of course encompasses but is not limited to computing. And it considers how we can design and arrange objects so that we can use them both efficiently and safely. So, like ergonomics, physical fit does cover the physical aspects of the computer side of human-computer interaction, or hardware, and it covers the physical aspects of how humans interact with computers. Yet, physical fit is broader than what most people think about when they hear the term ergonomics. To design or evaluate for physical fit, we consider basically everything that is under the umbrella of physiology, including our levels of hearing, the strength and limitations of our vision, how we see or don't see colors, how our bodies reach for things, and the strength or lack thereof of our muscles. It includes the limitations of how quickly we react or respond using our muscles, and the limitations of our sensory organs in general. So let's look at some examples of these factors and their implications. Sound, for example, is an important way in which we interact with computers. There are noise levels that can actually hurt your ears. That is to say that your ears have only a certain degree of sound level that they can withstand before they start to encounter harm. Also, our hearing changes as we age, and that includes the frequencies that we can and cannot hear. So these can have implications for the tones, for the levels of sound that we use and implement in computing interfaces. In respect to our vision, we have different strengths of perception at different fields of vision. For example, our eyes are less sensitive to colors at the periphery, with lowered ability to perceive reds, greens, and yellows, but with more sensitivity for blues. And as another example, small changes in shades of blue are more difficult to distinguish than small changes in red. So this can have implications for how we design displays, particularly large ones. Additionally, as humans, we're built with limited reach and strength. Using computers can cause strain in our posture. It can cause muscle fatigue, especially when having to sit for long periods of time. We can also develop carpal tunnel from repetitive mouse or keyboard motions. And that means that both hardware and software need to be designed to reduce specific wrist movements, especially when it comes to specific types of tasks. And there are other considerations which may have implications for hardware and software design, such as the thresholds and deficiencies of our human senses, such as the smallest amount of light that can be detected, or the slightest sound that can be heard and understood, or our ability to feel, or the lowest amount of pressure required to activate our sense of touch. And there are other sensory organs with abilities and limits that today may have little to no direct relationship on human-computer interaction, but, well, maybe someday they will as we develop more wearable and embedded technologies, as well as more and more immersive computing environments like augmented and virtual reality. Now, as noted when we discussed cognitive fit way back in module number 3, our sensory organs translate our experience to perceptions, which are processed by our brains. Our brains, or more specifically, our mental processes, drive behavior and formulate attitudes towards our experiences. So, although we've broken down fit into 3 categories of cognitive, affective, and now physical, it's important to point out that these all overlap. They have overlap, and they must all be considered in respect to how we design and develop computing tools, user interfaces, to be both useful and usable. And an understanding of these can also help us to evaluate the extent to which existing technologies reduce effort for success and maximize our well-being. As we move forward, we'll see even more overlaps amongst these categories of fit, but in our next video, we'll consider some ways that computing tools have been designed to address specific limitations and variations in human ability, which I think you'll find insightful and enlightening. So, stay tuned.